Well, Kevin said we're going to be introduced to a few professors who are going to drone on, and then they told us we only had 10 minutes. So I know how to handle 50 minutes or an hour, but 10 minutes is a little bit of a challenge to talk about 36 years. To be honest, I was a little overwhelmed with the prospect of what do I say about a 36-year career in 10 minutes. So what I'm going to do is talk about a little bit of a fun, personal story of change, and then be a little bit more serious about a professional aspect of my appointment. I'm going to start with the tie. When I was a PhD student at Michigan State, I walked into my major professor's office one day. He's wearing a gorgeous blue suit, a really snappy tie. And I said, "Whoa, Dr. Allen, you're looking good. What's going on?" And he looked at me a little surprised and said, "Well, Ed, I'm meeting 135 juniors at 10:10. And that sunk in. Dr. Allen was trying to tell me, and I went on to see this many, many times, how much respect he had for the tradition of teaching and for his students. So when I got to Cornell, I made Dr. Allen a little bit of a model for me, and I wore a tie every day that I taught a class. I did a lot of teaching over 36 years. And it wasn't that unusual to wear a tie in the early 80s. When you were a faculty member at Cornell. But over the years, the dress codes at university campuses changed, as they did in society, if some of you haven't noticed. And the dress codes loosened up considerably. Almost no one wore a tie. In the summer months, you see faculty teaching in sandals. Blue jeans were commonplace. And I started to ask myself, I wonder if the tie is now getting in the way of showing students that I respect the role and what I'm trying to do for them and with them. And are they looking at me and thinking, who is this old school guy trying to teach contemporary marketing but wedded to a wardrobe of yesteryear? So I thought about this for a few years. And 3 years ago, I'd been at Cornell 33 years at this point, and it finally dawned on me that dress codes had changed. So I went to my class one day, and I think there's a couple students over there in this class, and I didn't wear a tie. First time in 33 years. And I said to them, notice anything different today? No. And somebody said, "Oh, you didn't turn the projector on." I said, "No." And there's a couple other guesses, and finally somebody said, "You're not wearing a tie." I said, "Right." So I told them the story. And I said, "But I have this dilemma, and you're the marketplace, you're the students in the marketplace, you have to help me out and vote. Do I honor the tradition, this insignificant little tradition perhaps that I set for myself 33 years ago, and continue to wear a tie till the end? I mean, I don't have that much more in my career to go. Or do I lose the tie and get with modern times?" The vote was 50-50. But I could see the looks in the eyes of the students trading glances with each other that they were a little bit embarrassed for me. They were trying to be polite. So I abandoned the tie. I've never worn the tie to teach again. In fact, I rarely wear a tie at all, except at special occasions, David, at Credit Suisse. Now, let me say a little bit something in a personal reflection about my career and my appointment at Cornell. That's really had the most profound effect, I think, on my career. If, when you think about university professors, you think primarily of research and teaching, you'd be largely correct. That's what most university professors do. At certain universities, however, and Cornell is one of them, some faculty have an appointment in extension or outreach. Outreach is an extension, is a creation of the Land Grant Act of 160 or 70 years ago, where the federal government actually provided funds for university researchers to extend the results of their investigations to clientele groups. And mostly in that era, it meant farm producers. When I came to Cornell, I was hired a third, research, teaching, and extension. So unlike Deb and Dale, my colleagues tonight, I only have a minority of my professional appointment that's really teaching. 2/3 of what I'm responsible for and what I'm evaluated for is research and outreach. And in an era when universities are increasingly being held accountable to society for the work that they produce. I like to think that the messages that I've taken to the food industry, which is largely the clientele that I've worked with and been responsible for, has benefited in some small way in maybe keeping Cornell relevant and germane to the real problems facing society. What's often not recognized, and what's been so incredibly valuable for me in my appointment, however, is that the benefits flow in both directions. It's not just the university educating stakeholders, it's also the stakeholders bringing so much back to the university. Both in my case and most people who have an extension outreach appointment for research and teaching programs. And let me just give you two quick examples. When you get to work with executives in the real world, they, especially in executive education programs that I had the great privilege of working with for 36 years at Cornell, you do investment analysis with these participants. You do case study and teamwork. You play some volleyball. You eat a lot of meals with them. And after a week or two, you really get to know these individuals extremely well. They begin to get interested in your program. They trust your judgment. And one of the last things they say before they leave the campus after a week or two is, "Oh, it's a great experience. Please let's stay in touch. If you ever need a favor, call." Well, they didn't know who they were saying that to, because I made a lot of calls. And we got data for research from companies that was totally inaccessible to other researchers. One of the best examples of that in my career, about 20 years ago, a faculty colleague of mine in the Johnson School got interested in evaluating advertising expenditures. Now, without giving any kind of marketing lecture, advertising expenditures are grouped into two main categories. There's sort of consumer media advertising, TV, radio, newspaper, magazine, outdoor, that's very easily tracked, and economists have been evaluating the impacts of that kind of advertising for 100 years. And then there's another major category, probably a little bigger actually than media advertising, called trade promotion. Very little research has been done in that area because it's all confidential transaction between seller and buyer. Things like free goods, things like end-aisle displays, trade shows for which there were not and are not data readily available. So I said to my colleague, what if we call a bunch of these companies that have been to our executive programs? They know us, they trust us. So we called about a dozen CPG manufacturers, food manufacturers, and about the same number of major retailers, all billion-dollar companies. We got an incredible amount of data, never before been gathered. We did our analysis, we wrote a paper, we submitted it to a premier journal in marketing, Journal of Marketing Research. We got the reviews back, and it probably wouldn't shock you if I told you that these academic reviewers aren't exactly bashful about making suggestions for change before these papers could be accepted. And these reviewers were no different. But the editor did something that, until that time with me, was unprecedented. He said to us, he said, "I hope you authors pay close attention and consider these suggestions made by the reviewers because they're very good ideas." He said, "But whether you do or not, I'm going to accept the paper on one condition. These data are such a gold mine, previously unknown to market researchers, that if you're willing to publish these data on a public website, I'm going to accept the paper outright." And this was an elite journal, so we did, and he did, and it remains one of my best publications probably. And it really came from the interaction that we'd had with these real-world practitioners as we got to know them in these outreach efforts in executive education. The case is even easier to make when you think about teaching. The number of people who come to our executive programs with which we work, sometimes they're a few days, sometimes they're a week or two. Often they're on the campus, but sometimes they're around the world. And they get to know our programs, they get to know our students. They say, "We'd like to get more involved. We'd be happy to be a guest speaker in your courses." Now, frankly, and a lot of you went to Cornell, maybe almost all of you, and you know that the faculty members, by and large, do a pretty good job with theory and explaining conceptual paradigms and so on. But the hard truth is most business professors have not made decisions in the business world. Most business professors went pretty fast through an academic PhD program and became a university faculty member. That's not true in all cases, and there's been sabbaticals and leaves and other things. But by and large, we benefit so much in the classroom when the faculty and the students, that is, when executives like yourselves, and many of you are sitting here tonight have done us the favor of coming back to be guest speakers, and our students can see the drama and the excitement that goes into these decisions and how the theory that they may learn in class is actually executed and implemented in the real world. So the guest speakers are just so important to the excitement and the drama of teaching something as pragmatic as business. Usually I would have 3 or 4 guest speakers a semester. In a lot of the courses I taught, you have to invite a few more than 3 or 4 because some are always going to have scheduling conflicts. Last semester, this past fall, for some reason I had no one cancel. I had 6 guest speakers. One of them was a CMO, Chief Marketing Officer of a multi-billion-dollar company. The other 5 were all CEOs. 2 of the 5 came from international destinations, one of which was Pakistan. And so people are coming from all over the world to help out with the student learning in our classrooms, and that's a direct corollary and benefit really from these relationships that we make in outreach in these executive programs. While they're there, they get excited about our students, and why wouldn't they, for crying out loud? Our students are unbelievable. They offer internships, they create jobs, they often get interested in helping us with funding. One of the best examples for my career in that regard was 1990, I think, or 91. 1990 or 91, I got a call from a company president on a Friday afternoon. He said, "I love being in your class. I'm so impressed with the Cornell students." And he said, "I've got some good news and bad news." And I said, "Okay." He said, the good news is I'd like to give you an annual gift of $40,000 to do something for your program. I said, "Well, that sounds pretty good." He said, "The bad news is I need your proposal by Monday." So that weekend I went home and made a few phone calls and wrote a proposal for something that we ultimately developed called the Food Marketing Fellows Program. There's a number of people sitting out here who've been involved in that program. And the program involved a series of courses, some field trips to company annual meetings, to field trips to trade shows, and perhaps the highlight of the program every year is an international study tour of a foreign market, a foreign food market. This is now 29 years later. We've been to virtually every country in Western Europe, some of them multiple times. We've been to Japan a couple times. We've been to China, Australia, South America, and it's not at all unusual for a student to come back from that program saying it was the most memorable learning experience they'd had at Cornell University. Tommy Gellert is sitting in the back row. I warned Tom that I might use his name in a story tonight. If I'm not mistaken, Tom has the NCAA record for Food Marketing Fellows trip. He went as an undergraduate, he went as a law student, and he went as an alum. Is that right? Pretty close. So a couple other people have been on 2, but Tom's got the only record for going on three trips. And all of these efforts of getting executives involved, both in our research programs and our teaching, are all these benefits that I'm trying to refer to that come back to Cornell as a direct function of our outreach efforts. I also have to say, and somewhere, no, right here in front of me, is Bob Tobin. I could single out lots of different people, but I'm not going to have the time. But I have to say Bob Tobin, who's the benefactor of the Robert G. Tobin Professor of Marketing chair that I hold and have held for, I don't know how long, Bob, 25 years maybe, 20 or 25 years. Bob not only made a very generous gift to Cornell to make that happen, but Bob has been one of the prime examples of the kind of executives that we work with in outreach programs who continue to give back to Cornell. He's been on, I don't know how many advisory boards, including the chair of one. He is always the first at the meetings. He's a little obnoxious. He shows up when you're still trying to put the name tags on. He's always 20 minutes before the coffee break starts. And he's been an incredible supporter for Cornell. Every summer I put together a CEO panel for one of our executive programs. Bob has been one of those CEOs on the panel for, I don't know, 20 years? 30 years? And he continues to participate, and so as a lot of people like that do. One more thank you. My wife's over here. I don't want to get emotional, but I wouldn't be here for 36 days, to say nothing about 36 years, without her incredible support. So thank you all for all you do for Cornell and your support for Cornell, and thanks for being here tonight.